You probably noticed something different here. Well, this is the Get.Out.N.Drive.Podcast. This is Jason Carr, and that's John Meyer. They're car guys, and they're about to meet Travis Bell.
Stick around for the whole episode. We found the first General Lee 1. There's going to be a new edition of Trade School, and we'll have some listener shout-outs.
You're listening to the Get.Out.N.Drive.Podcast with John CustomCarNerd Meyer and Jason Old Car Guy Carr. We'll be bringing you gearheads everything you never wanted to know about cars and why they should be on the road and not in your garage. Are you ready to get out and drive?
Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Get.Out.N.Drive.Podcast. My name is Jason Old Car Guy Carr.
And I am John CustomCarNerd Meyer.
Folks, if you grew up in the 70s and 80s and you had that favorite TV show and you ever sat there and thought, man, I'd love to be a part of that one day. Well, I was one of those guys, and I followed the Dukes of Hazzard like clockwork, like crazy. I wanted the car. I loved Daisy Duke. We loved the police chases, and we even liked Flash the dog. We've got a fella here today that's willing to talk a little bit about the Dukes of Hazzard, and specifically the General Lee, and even more specifically, the very first General Lee. Welcome, Travis, to the Get.Out.N.Drive.Podcast.
Thank you guys for having me. I hope everything's above average wherever you guys are.
So far, so good. I've been following a lot of things you've done, and one of the things that has most interested me is your story of Lee 1 and finding it and rescuing it and the whole situation. My biggest first question is, did you know that car was going to take on a life of its own? Did you know that it was going to blow up as much as it did after you found it?
And sometimes the hunt is better than the find. It's almost depressing when you spend so many years looking for this thing. We were back and forth, of course, to Georgia. The first 5 episodes of the Dukes of Hazzard were filmed in Georgia. After 5 episodes, they had 51 total vehicles, and I knew that through photos and things that they had arrived with 3 General Lees and left with 3 General Lees. But clearly in all the photos, the 2 out of the 3 that they left with were 68s, and they were converted. So that means they had left something behind. So we spent years and years and years chasing down the people that had worked on the show. And remember, for such a short period of time, these are not the episodes that were in California. This was just a couple 2-month gig to film a pilot that no one would ever, thought would take off, like this goofy, magical orange car that flew. And of course, Dodge never built an airplane, but whenever it was in the air, it was never came down swell, for lack of a better term. Right. So we started chasing down the body shops and the people and the transportation directors and even just extras, anybody who happened to be there. Like, they would hold up the school bus route to jump a car down like Main Street and piss off all the parents because their kids aren't home yet. So I had no idea that it would take so long to figure out how to spell Schischler, because Don Schischler was the transportation captain. And he was still very active. He's in the business. So anytime there was a NASCAR commercial, him and his son John would, tow around a old Winston Cup car back then and shoot commercials and things. So he created camera cars and different things, and just a very interesting fella, and had no reason to be nice to me. I was just some Yankee from, up north looking for the, pride of the South. And after I had found Mr. Schischler, he unlocked everything. And his daily driver before I met him was one of the Wagon Queen family trucksters, because he was the camera operator on National Lampoon's Vacation. So he had 2 of them, actually. And then when I got there to his shop, he had a whole bunch of blue Ford Tauruses from the movie Road Trip, where they had like the short bus, and a bunch of them had like the wheels blown off them and everything. Had a couple weird Grand Nationals, but he had a Suburban with a gun turret on it. It was from some Cindy Crawford Baldwin movie that was terrible, but this was his daily driver. And I was like, man, this guy's rad. Like, let's, please be my dad, right? So he was the one that unlocked everything. And he was just nice enough to know how to play the game, to figure out he knew exactly what I wanted. And he helped us along the way 100%. And without him, it would still be in the woods, or it would probably be gone by now.
So you talked earlier about how long of a hunt and how long of a search this was to find this car. And I mean, the biggest thing that comes to mind was, how long were you prepared to keep hunting for this car to see if it actually even existed?
So it took 4 years, multiple trips back and forth down to Georgia. And we're talking like driving Buick Centuries, just like disposable cars that it was no fun driving. Lots of Covington newspaper articles and finding the people that took the photo in the Covington newspaper article. So the car was jumped at Oxford College. Lee 1 was jumped on at Oxford College, and they jumped it on Veterans Day because they knew that there wouldn't be very many students and or faculty on staff that day. So they had told the college, Oxford College, that they were just going to do some hard driving scenes, and that was it. And so it appeared in the 79 Oxford College yearbook. And so then I had to find out the folks who were on campus that day. So I chased down the class of 77 or 78, 9, and 80 for alumni, and they all had terrific stories. And some of them actually had cameras. And they said, yes, I was there that day. So I ended up with tons of footage and photos that no one had ever seen before. Chased down the original dean of students who was lied to his face. They lied to him. And of course, the students were there and heard all this going outside their dorms and like, what on God's green earth is going on out there? And so, of course, everybody has a phone and a camera on their phone now. And to have a 35 millimeter camera and things back then, it was pretty rare. But there were, so in the 79 yearbook, that appears, the jump appears in the Oxford College campus yearbook, but it also says who took the photo. So lots of, grassroots investigation, and that led me to a lot of interesting people that really helped us go down the right path. And I was prepared for the long haul on it, but I didn't know it was going to take, you never give up, but I didn't know that was going to take that long.
So no pun intended, just like poking through the woods and asking everyone and fishing with a wide net.
Yes.
That's how it happened.
Oh, very much so. Making like little cards and putting them in places, diners, putting a sign up says generally or jump down this hill on this date. If you were here, email or call this number. And, we found it we found it. When did we find it? We found it in, so 01, 03, we jumped the car. So we found it in like 2000. And that was not very prevalent back then to have emails or camera phones or non-dial-up internet, So getting people to cooperate meant seeing them face to face. So
did you have, let's call them kooks? Did you have people that weren't involved with it, that like wanted to be involved with it, and you found out that their story was bull?
Oh yeah, there are still to this day there are a lot of people that believe the Dukes of Hazzard was a documentary. So we ran into a lot of that. There was some, but you got to remember, Covington and Conyers, Georgia, was Hollywood South. They filmed in the heat of the night down there. Of course, lots of Smokey and the Bandit stuff in and around there. In the movie Cannonball Run, they landed the plane on Covington Square when they went to go and get a 6-pack of beer. Right. But that is also Hazard County. So there was a lot of things in it. And so people will forget that the Dukes of Hazzard was not the heat of the night. So we had a lot of contamination there, for lack of a better term. But a lot of the original historic photos and the things that appeared in the yearbook and the Covington News, that unlocked a lot of things. And then a lot of photographers. And then, we ended up with scripts and things like that. And it would say who was the prop and the set director and things. So then you start trying to figure out if these people are alive or, if they'll take a phone call from some idiot that's chasing down a show that they only worked, 5 episodes on.
So take us to the point where you either got the phone call or the whatever it was that said, hey, I think I know where this car is, and like take us from that point on. Like the phone call comes in, and like, are you jumping out of your shoes and getting your car and trucking down to Georgia, like right immediately? Like what took place as soon as you got that phone call?
So what had happened is, referencing Mr. Schischler, Don Schischler, he had gone off, and I had called him, and I said, Mr. Schischler, hey, it's Travis Bell again. And of course, I was always very proper. He'd tell me to call him Don, and I was like, just, you don't call a judge Steve, you call him Your Honor, So it was always weird for me to call him Mr. or Ms. Don. So he was in Alaska, and I said, he was filming something up there. He was on something. And he just said, hey, I will be back. His shop was in Beaufort Dam, Georgia. And I'll meet you down there and we can talk Dukes of Hazzard. And so I ran down there about the same time, gave him a couple of days to get home. And I said, after, the 23rd of December, 1978, and having 51 totaled vehicles, I just simply asked him, I said, what in the hell did you do with them all? Like, where did they all go? And he said on that day, he called a gentleman by the name of Cliff Shaw, who owns a transmission recycling company up in Dawsonville, Georgia. And he just had to get rid of these cars. And I said, well, when was the last time you talked to Cliff Shaw? He said on the 23rd of December, 1978. And he basically had traded them all to him for like a future transmission job or something. Just come get these things out of my life. And he said, yes, I remember we had 3 police cars, this car, another car, a wrecked 71 race car. And at that point, I'm like, tell me more about this wrecked 71 race car, because I had known that, of course, the Duke boys in one of the episodes is chasing down an engine from a wrecked Richard Petty race car. And back then, the roof of it said John Merende on the roof of it, and it had 71s on it. And John Merende was one of the transportation captains on the Dukes of Hazzard. And it said H&H Body Shop on the quarter panel and 71s. And it was this green wrecked race car, which was originally the very first General Lee that they repainted green because they, of course, had no budget, and they just knew that it had already been in the sky and it was worthless at this point. So Warner Brothers went even further to take cinder blocks and beat the hell out of the car to get the word John, or the name John Merende, off the roof. And then they scuffed all the way down the H&H Body Shop because, of course, the H&H Body Shop was Henry Holman is H&H Body Shop. And he was the one who painted all the cars and saved them when they needed the damage repaired close to Beaufort Dam and Social Circle and Covington and Conyers. And so needless to say, they were not going to give him priceless advertising on a show that's about to be hopefully picked up by a network. And they beat the car up even more. And so in that episode, they just simply tow the General Lee, or the General Lee tows the General Lee around. That is a repainted General Lee into a green 1969 Charger with 71s on the door. And it looked terrible, but you could still tell that something wasn't right. And there was a parking sticker in the window that you can see in another episode when the car was orange. And a lot of these things kind of connected the dots. So I just simply asked Mr. Schischler, I said, where does Cliff Shaw live, or where's his business or whatever? And he said, it's in Dawsonville, Georgia. And I said, what are you doing? He said, we're about to go get in this Suburban that was in a Cindy Crawford, Alec Baldwin movie with a gun turret on the roof. And we're going to go visit Mr. Shaw. And I said, man, you're my guy. But so on the way there, Mr. Shaw or Mr. Schischler, he knew how to play the game. He knew what I wanted. He knew I wanted the cars. He knew I wanted information on what the heck happened to the cars if they're not there. And he knew how to, I'm going to run traffic on this guy while you go look this way or whatever else. He knew how to play the game. And so we got down Lumpkin Campground Road, and apparently no one lives on Lumpkin Campground Road because there's a nuclear locomotive buried in concrete, or if you want to have children with 4 eyes on one head, you live on Lumpkin Campground Road or something. So we went down this place, and to the left, it's typical Georgia, not dirt road, but old paved road. And just on both sides, just pine trees as far as the eye could see, going up hills on both sides. And Mr. Shaw lived up that road and up a heavy gravel driveway that went up about 2 acres up a hill. But when Mr. Schischler turned in there, as far as the eye could see was cars in the woods, just cars in the woods, and pine trees growing through, and when trees grow against cars and denting cars and cars in the woods. But then what was bizarre is transmissions stacked with the bell housing down, but then an empty coffee, empty soup can on top of the tail shaft. So, but they're like just tombstones, like as far as the eye can see, and just transmission after transmission from 727s to, everything. And it was weird. Like it was this creepy, weird place. But he lived way at the top of this hill, had a nicer home, like a smaller cabin looking home up there. But, Mr. Shaw had done well for himself. I mean, he understood transmissions, and he was a very, very nice gentleman too. And when we got there, I've got this proper speaking how y'all are, voice, and Don knows how to play the game. Like he's very proper too, but he can turn the Southern on if he has to. So he bangs on the door, and his wife, Cliff Shaw's wife, June, for some reason, her nickname was Looney, and I still don't have any idea why, but June answered the door and said, "Hey, is Cliff home? Blah, blah, blah. And he should be here sometime. He's at work, XYZ. And hey, June, it's Don Schischler, we blah, blah, blah." And they kind of, he said, "I'm going to run traffic for you, Travis." And I'm like, "Cool." And I said, "Miss Shaw," I said, "is there a green wrecked, like Richard Petty race car here on the property?" She said, "Oh, yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." She goes, "Yeah, if you go back down the driveway to the second Pinto, mind you, not the first Pinto, but the second Pinto, and just start walking in toward the road that we had come in on." And I immediately turned on, I had like a high 8 Sony camera where you can literally hear the tape go in through the camera. And I just turned it on and started walking down the road. And you can literally hear me breathing on the thing. Like I'm like, after 4 years of looking, if this lady named Looney at the top of the hill, while Don Schischler's keeping her busy, if she is correct, I'm about to, find the holy grail of television star cars in the middle of the woods in Dawsonville, Georgia. And after 20 feet in from the second Pinto, there it sat, with pine needles to the moon on it, missing one of its doors, but still had the Los Angeles Southwest University College parking sticker on it, and then had all the identifications that it was the original General Lee. And so I had just found the first General Lee from the Dukes of Hazzard. And then what do you do? So that's it took a while, but Mr. Schischler was so rad. And he walked down and he said, "Yeah, this is it." And I was like, "Cool." So that's how we found it.
So there sits Lee 1, just down from the second Pinto. But that's just the start of this tale. We want you to ride along with the Get Out and Drive podcast.
Pitch in some gas money to help keep the Get Out and Drive podcast on the road.
Pitch in any amount you want. But if you fill our tank with a $10 subscription, we'll send you free stickers from the Get Out and Drive podcast, Old Car Guy, STL Pinstripes, and Racing Jet as a thank you.
Find links in the show notes and at Get.Out.N.Drive.com. My biggest question hearing what you're saying is, why Travis Bell? Why did no one get this car prior to you? Was no one as interested and ruthless as and driven as you? Kind of. Do you have any idea why no one had found the car prior to you?
I mean, there is automotive archaeology, and some people are. I don't know. Some people are. I don't want to say they're lazy, but when Wayne Wooten bought the 17 General Lees from Warner Brothers in the 90s, there were 17 real ones, and but these cars are absolute relics, but they are I mean, of course, they sat outside with the windows down since 1984, and then they were bought and purchased in 91 or 92. So, and they were sun-baked and whatever else. So the reason why no one, of course, everybody just went and looked at the filming locations. They didn't really, let's go to the Boar's Nest, let's go to Uncle Jesse's house, let's go to whatever else. they didn't really fathom that anything was left behind. And I had already done all of the homework where you can see all the pictures of the cars leaving H&H Body Shop and going to the Valuze Ranch, which is Gene Autry's Melody Ranch, and the Valuzes owned it. The Valuzes are famous for any kind of military vehicle that you saw, for the 80s, and any movie, they were the ones that provided all the tanks. But then they also got the contract to build all the General Lees for the Dukes of Hazzard. So I had already done all the homework and realized, like I said, that they had showed up with 3, left with 3, but Mr. Schischler had informed me that he had built 2 and actually built 3, but he had built 2, so they left with the ones that they showed up with, and little did they know that there was a little shell game there where they actually didn't leave with the cars that they showed up with. So why no one went looking for it before, I just really don't think that they had connected enough dots. And I had spent a lot of time on some AOL dial-up kind of stuff, like connecting some serious dots, and just some terrible printouts and lots of phone calls, because a lot of people are afraid to call somebody out of the blue, and I'm still that guy. Like, give me a phone, I have no problem with, because even on Facebook Marketplace this day, when people will make you an offer on Facebook Marketplace and haven't seen it yet, that will make my skin crawl. I'm like, will you pay $500 less for it? I would if you come out here and look at the damn thing first. But so, I have no problem with making a lot of phone calls, and it took 4 years worth of phone calls to get to that point in the woods in Dawsonville, Georgia. So
you're going to put it to tenacity and the fact that you were driven.
Very much so. It had to be, and or a few screws loose, but
all of us hot rodders have that. I can tell you that.
Yes.
Well, I think sometimes too, part of that might come as a point of, like, someone like me, if I just out of the blue said, you know what, I want to go find the very first Daisy Duke Jeep.
Sure.
In my mind, in the back there somewhere, I would understand that Jeep likely just does not exist anymore, or it's been long gone because that was 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. I'm not even going to bother.
And that's true. And that's you have, if you talk yourself out of it, and where I refuse to talk myself out of it. And, like I said, automotive archaeology for me, and star cars and things, you just proved a perfect point. Where is Daisy Jeep? Gosh, where do we begin? And then you just kind of, you stack everything up before you even jump over the first wall. So.
Yeah, it's like trying to solve a murder. You gotta start somewhere, and you gotta start asking those questions. I guess I want to go back to Don Schischler and Mr. Shaw, and you got to the point where you physically, tangibly have your hands on the car.
Yes.
You knew at that point you had to have it. Obviously, I got to do this. I've got to. When did the words come out of your mouth that says, I want to buy this? How much? Or how did you get to that point?
So Mr. Shaw had come home, like June had said, drove past us up the driveway. It's starting to get dark out at this point. Of course, they had the LEE1 stamped by the windshield. And basically it was just to keep track of those cars. There was Lee 1, 2, and 3 that arrived. Lee 1 was the most, used vehicle. It did have a little bit more of an option, more options than most of them did. But, and also had the goofy chrome rocker panels that were not very popular back then, but it had it on it. So we all walked back up. Myself, Mr. Schischler, walked back up to meet with Mr. Shaw. Howdy, how you doing? And he was not one of those people that leave like the IROC Z in their yard till, it rusts away and says, I'm going to get to it sometime. But I just simply said, hey, Mr. Shaw, I'm very interested in this Richard Petty wrecked race car. And he goes, oh, the General Lee. I go, oh, because at that point, he knows that it's just not some old junk stock car. And
he's on to you.
Yeah. And it had, all the concrete in the trunk still and everything. I mean, it was just very, very, had the center hoop bar cut out of it, but I know where it is now, and everything. So he was just very not interested in selling because his grandson, Zach, was a fan of the TV show. And his grandson was probably 6 to 8 years old at the oldest. And I'm like, looking at him, I go, dude, if you plan on restoring this thing, Zach's going to be my age by the time he's done with it. And he also notified me that over the top of the hill, he also had the original police cars. And I was like, you have the police cars in this here? And he goes, yeah, if you just go through the gate over the top of the hill. So sure enough, we're out gate, there's goats and things up there. And about another 50 yards down on the left were both of the police cars, Roscoe and Enos's original police cars, parked side by side with the windows up. So they were in much better condition. And I walked out of there knowing that I could not tell a soul what I had just found, because if you let somebody onto it, then they're going to be looking for it. And it was, they were not for sale, but I left it on a very, decent, good to see you, nice to meet you kind of thing. And because if you're a Star Wars fan and you find the Millennium Falcon, but it's not for sale, you cannot get on the internet and say, hey, I found the Millennium Falcon, because then people will start looking for it. So I didn't tell a soul that I'd found it. And I had only 2 or 3 people with me. And, the best crime to do is by yourself because loose lips sink ships. So we all kind of made a pact not to tell a soul. And I had to figure out how to get this thing off the hill in Dawsonville, Georgia. So
Now that Travis has found Lee 1, what kind of shuck and jive will he have to do to get it home? If you didn't hear, 2 of our favorite partners have joined forces. Racing Junk Classifieds is now the official marketplace of Drag and Drive Addiction.
Mike Narks is a great friend of the Get.Out.N.Drive.Podcast. We're excited to have him join us as a Racing Junk partner. Be sure to visit our site, Get.Out.N.Drive.com, for a link to Drag and Drive Addiction.
DragAndDrive.com is the best source for news and entertainment from the Drag and Drive community, showcasing vehicle builds, racer spotlights, event updates, and more. Plus, they are the only site to find historical data for all Drag and Drive events since the beginning. Drag and Drive hosts events that are considered the modern day 2-lane blacktop.
Racers drive their cars from track to track over several days, carrying only the items they need to race or repair their vehicle. The events use a racer's average ET for their winner selection, taking that time to sort the racers into top racer lists, like the top 100 racers of a designated year. Drag and Drive provides historical updates for standalone events. And I don't mean to brag, but I did get to ride in the Narcs cart, and that is Jason's favorite Panther platform.
how did we do it? So
yeah, I mean, because I know it gets a little dodgy. But
yes.
How long until you first touched it until you started to move on it again, and how?
So, how do you even? He's told you no. This is going to be his grandson's car, and I knew his grandson's name was Zach. So I started sending him like the little 4-pack to that address, to Cliff Shaw's grandpa's address, like the 4-pack of like the match or Earl cars of the Dukes of Hazzard. And like the models, I would, like, another month would go by and I'd send him all the models of Daisy Sheep and the General Lee and whatever else. John Schneider and I are friends. If I ever lose my phone, don't pick it up and hit the word Bo, because it'll call John Schneider. So I would run into John at places and I couldn't even tell him that I'd found it. And I'd say, hey, can you sign a picture that says to Zach, or can you sign a 1/18th car to Zach? So I started sending stuff down there, and this went on for 8 to 10 months and coming up on a year. And I'm like, man, I have greased the wheels just enough where it's probably time for me to attempt to make the phone call. And on a
But you haven't had any return contact from them?
No, nothing.
Okay.
And all I had done is just blindly send a bunch of gifts to his grandson.
Can we say that the sending of the gifts to the grandson was sort of the shuck and jive of weaseling in there a little bit?
The ultimate shuck and jive.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, I would say that is a quality statement, because it would be the modern version of shuck and jive. And I was talking to my friend that was with me, and I was like, man, is now the time? Because it can still be no, it can still be you've just wasted, probably $400 in trinkets or whatever else. And so I called, and June answered the phone. And I said, Miss Shaw, I said, hey, so Travis Bell from Indianapolis, how y'all are, kind of thing, and whatever. And she goes, oh, yeah. And she goes, we sure do appreciate you sending Zach all this stuff down, la, la, la. I said, man, I know he's a fan of the show. And I said, I'd love to come down and talk to Cliff about that old car. And she goes, oh, yeah, if you ever find your way down here sometime, just stop on in. And that was my green light. And that was not a yes, but it was not a no. And at that point, you come to my property now. If you Google Earth my property, you're like, dude, Travis has got trailers and cars, and he's just ridiculous. At that point, I did not have an open car hauler. I knew we needed an open car hauler. And we had friends that lived in South Carolina that had a roll-off, a truck, flatbed truck or a tow truck. And I knew that we needed all these things at the right place at the right time. And so my friend came down from Chicago, and he has a truck and open trailer, and we took off on a late Saturday night. So that phone call was on a Thursday, a late Saturday night, and in the rain, and drove through the night to Dawsonville, Georgia, to get to we ended up at the Chase Elliott wins the pool hall, the pool room. We all said we're going to meet there in Dawsonville. And so we pull up, and probably 20 minutes later, the roll-off truck pulls up, and we go down to the old nuclear locomotive road or whatever it is, where it's probably what happened to my hair. I don't know, but I didn't have hair when this started, so I guess I can't blame it on that. So we all end up down there, and I didn't want Cliff to know that we had brought a tow truck, because I didn't want to be like, hey, I'm here to take it kind of thing. And so we left the tow truck back at the pool hall, and I pulled up, and Mr. Shaw was driving down the driveway in his Astro van, and it's a gravel driveway, and it's, Georgia hill, and he come down pretty hot, and it's that typical sound on gravel, and stopping, realizing that it's me. He rolled down the window, and he was not happy. And I said, hey, Cliff, hey, June, blah, blah, blah. I said, I'm here to talk to you about that car, and just giving me the rights, like, why the hell am I here? Blah, 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 blah. I mean, just really not happy with Travis Bell at that point. And I said, well, Cliff, I said, I just called June just the other day, and she told me to come on down. And she was in the passenger seat, and she looked at him and was like, well, yeah, I told him to calm down. And I was like, man, this is not going real good right out of the gate. And he informed me that he was going to church, and he does not work on Sundays. And he said, I don't know what you're going to do or how you're going to get it out of there, but you can see what you can do. Because he knew that he was going to have to tow all these cars out of the way, because it was surrounded by a bunch of dead cars, and it was in the woods. But he had
no idea that you were coming at all.
No, June never told him, but June had my back, because she was in the passenger seat, and right. Had agreed that, yes, I told him to come down. And I also informed him that I just drove, 600 miles through the rain overnight to be standing in his driveway. So,
wow. And he had just only seen you. Like I said, he didn't know you were coming. He only saw you because he saw you in the driveway.
That's right. And I was walking up the driveway as he was driving down to go to church. So,
whoops.
Yeah, he was not, and he looked good, because he was an overall kind of guy, and worked hard. Like I worked hard hands, like he was just an interesting fella. And, so he was shitty with me, like mad, like yelled at me like I was his son, kind of mad. And, but after I had the green light you can see what you can do, because I showed up in a pickup truck, he knew that if I was able to get it out, I would have had to go on back, and he had heavy equipment on the property, and he was going to have to work on a Sunday, and he does not do that. So he takes off. We call the tow truck. They haul down there from the pool hall, and it's now starting to rain, and we're on the side of a mountain in Georgia with pine trees everywhere trying to move this thing. And we move a couple cars out of the way and tow some things. We brought some big 4x4s and 6x6s because has no wheels, no tires on it. It's missing a door. It's a big block car on the ground. And then somehow we had made enough room to get the tow truck around the front of it, scooped it under. Everything's on a terrible slant. We'd go about a foot and it'd try to slide off the bed, and we'd push it. And there's just all of us working together to get this thing. And literally when we rocked the bed, it was really not at the right axis, but it just got it up enough to where it would pull it up out of there. But then we had to get the tow truck out of there because now it's raining relatively good. And there was one little goofy gate on the far end of his property, and we were able to zigzag through just about everything and got the gate open. You asked for forgiveness before you asked for permission, but I don't think there's a chain on the gate anymore. We got the gate open and pulled the flatbed out onto the trail or onto the street on the nuclear locomotive road there and Lumpkin Campground Road, and the flatbed and the trailer was sitting there. We just waited. We just waited for Mr. Shaw to come home. And at that point, like, we could have hauled ass and been like, peace out, Mr. Shaw, but yeah, go ahead.
Before we go any further, so let's just back up for a second. You meet him on the road. He's ticked off because you showed up.
Mad.
And he doesn't want to do business on Sunday. But you interpreted him as saying, see what you can do, as move cars, load it up, get it ready to go. And so now you've got the thing on the flatbed. You're sitting on the road waiting for Mr. Shaw to come home. What expression is on his face when he sees the car sitting on the back of the tow truck?
Well, so now, of course, and it's raining, and we probably waited for him just a quick 20 minutes because it took us about 3 hours to move things around and get it out of the way, and move some, trees are growing up, and just, it was bad. Like, I can't, and of course that same video camera is rolling the whole time, and it's starting to overheat because of the humidity, and it's just bad. But we have footage of us doing it. It was ridiculous. So we're sitting there like going, okay. And then so we hear something come down the road, and not so many people live on this road, and woof, up the driveway, here goes the Astro van. Boom. And I'm like, shoot, man, Mr. Shaw is ticked off, man.
He passed right by you, did not stop.
Yeah, didn't say how y'all are. Peace out, Girl Scout. He didn't say, What are you damn Yankees doing down here? He drove past us and up the driveway, which was about a 2-acre driveway. And of course, it's the gravel that washes out with the ruts in it. Like, it was just, and you guys, they had the red Georgia clay peeking through all this mess, and now it's raining and washing down in this. And I'm like, and they're all looking at me like, you go talk to him. I'm like, bro, I don't want to say.
Well, Travis and his boys have sure ruffled Mr. Shaw's feathers. It's not looking good for the boys. Tune in next time to see if they can smooth things over with Mr. Shaw.
I had not been in a fist fight since high school, and catching people pick paint off of the car led to probably the first fist fight that I had gotten into in years. And
it's that time again, time for Trade Schooled. Through our What Drives Youth initiative and partnership with the RPM Foundation, we strive to put an emphasis on the value of attending automotive trade school and passing down information to the next generation of gearheads.
This week on Trade Schooled, John learned a fun fact about the history of traffic laws. John, what did you learn?
You know how I feel about sharing the road with bicyclists who think traffic laws don't apply to them. We talked about it on a previous backseat episode. Well, just imagine at the very beginning of the invention of cars. Suddenly, there are these motorized rolling machines barreling down the road at 8 miles an hour, intermingling with pedestrians and people riding those tall-wheeled penny farthing bikes. The word that comes to mind is chaos. Anyway, I learned about the origin of jaywalking. Well, I found out the concept of jaywalking was invented by the auto industry in the 1920s to shift the blame of car accidents away from cars to pedestrians. At the time, the word jay was considered a slur, synonymous with redneck or hillbilly. I know some people aren't too keen on history lessons.
True, but if you're thinking about going into the automotive trade, learning vehicle history is important. So the Get Out and Drive podcast wants to encourage you to check out the Academy of Art University's Automotive Restoration Program that focuses on hands-on experiences to learn the art of preserving classic cars. For more information, visit academyart.edu or the Get.Out.N.Drive.com for links.
I know many people may look down at someone in the automotive trade. They're just grease monkeys. But there's a ton of knowledge that goes into a hands-on job in the auto industry. You're going to be working in a car that someone is going to get out and drive in. It's your job to make sure that it's put together correctly and it's safe, roadworthy car. That's a pretty important job. And that's trade schooled. Like I always say, the best way to gain knowledge and information is to learn with your mouth shut. Our Facebook group, Get Out and Drive, is just blowing up. We have new members join every day who are sharing photos, car events, and automotive services.
And the group wouldn't be successful without our member contributions. We want to give a shout out to Chuck Callis. He posted in the group, the most enjoyment, other than building cars, is get out and drive them and enjoy the car people. We couldn't agree more, Chuck.
And I want to say thanks to Joke Jesus Martinez Cavazos. He is one of the biggest contributors to the group. He's always posting cool car pics.
So head over to Facebook and join the conversation in the Get Out and Drive group. You can also find the links at Get.Out.N.Drive.com.
Cruise on over to our website, Get.Out.N.Drive.com, for all the info you never wanted to know about our podcast. Hit us up on our listener hotline, be the first to know what's happening, get industry news, and grab your Get Out and Drive merch. Connect with us on social media. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow us on Twitter at Get.Out.N.Drive.Pod.
National Get Out and Drive Day is slated for October 1st, 2023. Have you signed up yet? Visit Get.Out.N.Drive.com for more details.
What drives you?